them. Oh, you stink! Believe it or not, there was a time that Blizzard was held as a halfway decent company among the gaming community. They were one of the largest publishers to create several games that popularized key genres, such as MMORPGs with World of Warcraft, RTSs with StarCraft, and action RPG Diablo-likes with, Diablo. From the late 90s up until the early to mid 2010s, the most controversy that Blizzard really came under was the odd copyright lawsuit, the occasional cease and desist, and that time they requested that members of their official form display their full real names. Seriously, what was that? Of course, given the information that has come to light, we now know that many cases of sexual harassment, mismanagement, discrimination, and multiple other factors led to a hostile working environment for many Blizzard developers for several decades. I think it is very important to preface this video by really highlighting what many of the staff members were experiencing at this time. Many reports mention the huge shift in work culture that was brought on with the success of WoW, and that many in leadership roles began to view themselves as rock stars, if you can believe it or not. While Blizzard management was incapable of upholding any shred of decency and integrity to their employees, we can also see a sort of correlation in the quality of their product. Some of the most notable examples from this time being when World of Warcraft launched the incredibly divisive Cataclysm expansion, which radically changed the in-game world and quest design, as well as the launch of Diablo 3 with the inclusion of the predatory auction house and the infamous Error 37 message that prevented many from even playing the game offline. In the middle of these rocky launches and toxic workplace culture, Blizzard began working on a new IP that we would one day know as Overwatch. Overwatch, the game born from chaos. A sensational title if I've ever heard one, but hey, it's not too far from the truth. Overwatch's development can actually be traced back to 2007, crazy enough, and it was under the name of Titan. Now, Titan was still a class-based shooter, but it originally had some level of MMO component, so I'd imagine it was something similar to Destiny. There aren't too many details on the development process of this game, but the gist of what I've found essentially calls the title a complete mess, with the team having little to no passion in the project, leading to Titan being cancelled in 2013. From the pieces of Titan, a small team led by Jeff Kaplan emerged and began reevaluating what game they could make to fit into the current gaming landscape. The team saw the most potential with the PvP aspect and the class-based system of Titan, and decided to focus in on those elements. They also looked into what other games were big at the time for influence, including the hero shooter Team Fortress 2 and the MOBAs League of Legends and Dota 2. A large emphasis was placed on team-based gameplay, as the experience of having their previous IP canned apparently brought the developers a sense of camaraderie that they wanted to show through gameplay elements. A surprisingly wholesome direction for the team, which is nice to see. The team eventually had their project greenlit, and at BlizzCon 2014, the world got their first look at Overwatch.
Conflict. As the world teetered on the brink of anarchy, a new hope arose. An elite international task force charged with ending the war and restoring liberty to all nations. Overwatch.
This was Blizzard's first new IP since StarCraft back in 1998, so this was very much a big deal. During the event, Blizzard showed off the first cinematic trailer for Overwatch, several extended gameplay showcases, and even allowed attendees to play the game in person. You can see that Blizzard really wanted this to be a cornerstone of their brand, and no expense was too great for them to market this game. Over the course of the next year, Blizzard continued updating the community with character breakdown trailers, all the way up to the release of the closed beta in October of 2015. To finally opening the beta to the public a few weeks before the game's launch. I remember the community being cautiously optimistic about this game, but some questions did arise during this time period. Is the game going to be balanced appropriately? Is it going to be too similar to Team Fortress 2? Is the launch going to be stable? Well, in early 2016, players finally got their answer. Overwatch launched in May of 2016 to PC, PS4, and Xbox One consoles, and even got a Switch port in October of 2019. Oh, that was nice of them. To say that the game was profitable would be an understatement, as it grossed over $565 million in sales by the end of 2016, and by the end of April 2021 had over 60 million players across all platforms. The game also performed well critically, sitting in the low 90s range on all platforms on Metacritic, minus the Switch. Bradley Ellis of Easy Allies was quoted as saying, "Though the game may seem sparse on maps and modes, the exquisite art direction, over-the-top action, and emphasis on teamwork all work together to provide endless hours of exhilaration. Most significant is the large cast of characters. With recognizable heroes that play as differently as they look, Blizzard has set a new standard for shooters. Overwatch is a triumph." The game also garnered several Game of the Year accolades from many publications, including IGN, GameSpot, and Eurogamer, and won several Game of the Year awards from the Game Awards, DICE Awards, and the Game Developers' Choice Awards.
The Game of the Year at the Game Awards 2016 is Overwatch.
Holy shit, that was a heap of praise for this one video game. Most game franchises don't even garner a fraction of the success that Overwatch experienced, but looking at the game, I can't say that I disagree with the love that this title received on its launch and early lifespan. I think the first thing that immediately grabbed everyone's attention when taking a look at this game was the art style. Now, I have never played a Blizzard title before this one, but one thing that I do acknowledge this company for is their ability to bring different characters and worlds to life like no other studio can, and Overwatch is no exception to this. During the development of World of Warcraft, Blizzard mastered the art of using color to invoke a particular mood or emotion into the scene, and this holds true for the world of Overwatch. Each map is devoid of NPCs, yet feels lived in with the variety of interactable objects to be played with, environmental storytelling to be explored, and Easter eggs to be discovered. Overwatch takes you on a world tour to show you a variety of different locations, and the art style complements each one of them to make them both incredibly distinct from one another, but also feel like they belong on the same planet. The maps we find give us an exaggerated, fantastical version of real-world locations, but with Blizzard's patented coat of paint as an overlay. We get a counterpart to a Japanese cherry blossom-filled courtyard with Hanamura, the foggy streets of London with King's Row, and with the rust-filled shithole of Junkertown, we finally have a video game counterpart to Gary, Indiana. Wait, that's Australia? While the world design of this game is beautiful and detailed, that doesn't even compare to our cast of playable characters. During the designing of these characters, the Overwatch team had the goal of each character being easily identifiable as a silhouette. This meant that each character of the roster needed to have these almost comic book superhero-like proportions in order to make them stand out from the typical FPS player model. For instance, compare Bastion, Roadhog, and Tracer to other popular FPS faces at the time, such as Gunman, Shooty McKill, and Mr. Second Amendment, and you'll notice the difference almost immediately. Honestly, I could gush for hours about each one of the characters' design, but a few of my favorites include Zenyatta, a robot monk who constantly spouts spiritual ascending quotes, Winston, a hyper-intelligent gorilla who has an infatuation with peanut butter, and Reaper, one of the edgy drawings I made in my planner during middle school. Yes, no two characters are alike, and that even goes beyond the character design as it extends into the game's story. Overwatch's story is set in a near-futuristic world around the 2070s. A little over 30 years prior to the events of the game, humans were experiencing a technological boom as they were developing robots with advanced artificial intelligence who were known as the Omnics. The Omnics were eventually treated as equals to the humans, but all good things were not meant to last. Apparently, no one heard of the 3 laws of robotics, and the Omnic factories began creating lethal and violent Omnics that began attacking humankind. Many countries began building task forces to eliminate the Omnic threat, but with very little success. Eventually, the United Nations assembled a group of soldiers called Overwatch who dispatched the Omnic threat. 2 of the founding members of Overwatch, Gabriel Reyes and Jack Morrison, eventually started to have a rift between them. See, Reyes was the leader of Overwatch, but Morrison was the more popular one that was viewed as the actual leader. You know the plot of Toy Story and the relationship between Woody and Buzz? Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, except imagine now that Woody got put in charge of a special task force made for covert ops called Blackwatch and started indiscriminately executing people.
Come on! You want a piece of me?
Anyways, this got a lot of heat on Overwatch, causing the group to disband. Several years later, a new threat is taking place in Russia. Winston begins to put an effort to bring in all the members of Overwatch back together, while Morrison takes on Vigilante Justice as the Rogue Soldier 76, and Reyes joins criminal organization Talos as the mass murderer Reaper. And that's kind of all we got. Okay, so one of my biggest gripes with Overwatch actually has to relate to this game's story, and what I believe has been a big missed opportunity on Blizzard's part. My main issue is that they have done such a good job getting me invested in what I've already seen that I am not satisfied with the output of content that currently exists. Let me explain. Most people know that Overwatch doesn't have a traditional story or campaign mode that would take you through your typical FPS narrative. Instead, Overwatch tells its story through various other means. This includes things such as canon story shorts released on the internet, a comic series, in-game dialogue between the characters, and the occasional event that was added post-launch. Now, all of this stuff is nice, and I'm glad we have it, but for characters as interesting as this, and for a world with such a solid premise, I just can't help but want more from this universe. This game is begging to have a story mode, and I know the sequel apparently has more single-player focused content, but at the time of the recording of this video, what that is remains to fully be seen. Honestly, video game adaptations to TV series are all the rage right now, and if someone like Netflix or HBO were to pick up the IP to make an original series, I would probably watch it. Well, as long as it's more of the Arcanes and Cyberpunk Edgerunners and less of the Resident Evils.
I mostly just read Zootopia porn.
Yep. Still can't get over that one. So with the story taking somewhat of a back seat, that brings us to Overwatch's main draw, the gameplay. Now, as mentioned before, Overwatch is a hero shooter, which before this game arrived on the scene, the only real practitioner of the genre was Team Fortress 2. Well, and Battleborn, I guess, but hey, who here honestly even remembers that piece of shit? Hero shooters are built around the idea of team-based gameplay, and Overwatch is no different. The teams are divided into 6v6 offense and defense compositions with some slightly different objectives based on the map and game mode. Sometimes you may be escorting a payload to a destination, other times you may be trying to defend a point from the attacking team, and other times you may have to have a battle to claim a neutral objective. Each of Overwatch's maps has been designed to accommodate a specific game mode to ensure the best possible balance for each team's respective goals. The other most prevalent characteristic in the hero shooter genre and Overwatch's gameplay in general is the emphasis on the unique playstyle of each character. Characters are divided up into a few categories in order to specify their role. We have tanks who specialize in high HP, damage mitigation options, and the ability to disrupt or prevent what the enemy team may be doing. Next we have support, who prefer to focus on healing, applying buffs to their teammates, and debuffing the enemy. Finally, we have the damage characters, who specialize in putting out high damaging offenses, a variety of mobility options, and locking down choke points through their assault. Longtime MMO players will recognize these roles as the Holy Trinity, possibly giving another nod to their World of Warcraft influence. Mastering a good team composition is critical to succeeding in Overwatch. Back before role queue, and trust me, we'll talk about that, choosing to have the entire team play as one role was certainly not a winning move and was often a death sentence in many matches. Having a balanced team comprised of each role created the best chance of performing well at the game. Well, until Blizzard broke the balance that they tried so long to maintain and the idea went out the window. But again, more on that later. Now, inside of those roles, we see even more specialization. Each character comes equipped with a unique weapon, passive attributes, skill kit, and ultimate ability that helps them carve out a particular niche to ensure no two heroes operate the same. We have characters like Reinhardt, who carries a big shield to lead the team to the objective, and a big hammer to dispatch enemies when they get there. We have Lucio, a hero that provides a constant AoE effect that can either heal or provide a speed boost to himself and his team. And Hanzo, a character with such a powerful and universally easy to use kit, your teammates will be begging you to switch off to any other hero just to show the enemy an ounce of mercy. Yes, pun intended. Jokes aside, switching heroes mid-match is not only something you can do, but is something that is heavily encouraged. See, there is an interesting counterplay among the heroes that makes certain matchups more likely to sway towards one hero than another. Let me give you an example. Say that you are playing Junkrat, a character who primarily uses a lobbed grenade launcher with a kind of slow travel time but has high splash damage. The enemy player is using a Pharah, a character who can essentially fly and has a rocket launcher that travels much faster than your grenade launcher and this player keeps kicking your ass. Sure, you can continue to try shoot grenades up in the air and hope that one might get you a lucky kill, but the smarter move would be to switch to a character like Widowmaker or Cassidy, who can essentially snipe the Pharah out of midair. Playing Overwatch is almost like playing the world's most complicated game of rock, paper, scissors, or how the type matchups work in a Pokemon game. It is with these gameplay factors that I believe that during the launch of Overwatch, this game earned a reputation of having an incredibly rewarding and addictive gameplay loop. Well, there was one more thing we could say was addicting about the game. In addition to the already wonderful character designs, Blizzard sought to implement even fancier skins, emotes, sprays, voice lines, and victory poses over the course of Overwatch's lifetime. This makes sense, as all of these things could further establish each character's unique identity and drive players for earning these rewards. Only one problem. Yep, that's right. If you want to earn a particular skin or emote, you need to first earn a loot box through the in-game progression system and pray to RNGesus that you actually obtain the item you want. Or, if you don't have the time to grind out those potential rewards, fork over some extra cash and Papa Blizzard will give you a few more rolls of the dice. This method of monetization gets more gross the longer you look at it, as they also included the ability to earn duplicate items in loot boxes which only offer you a small in-game currency amount that you can put towards actually getting something you want. Finally, during the post-launch cycle, Blizzard preyed on people's FOMO by including seasonal skins for popular characters, meaning, hey, if you want that Witch Mercy skin, and look at yourself, you know you do, you better play a shit ton around Halloween, or buy some extra loot boxes in the hope of getting it. Blizzard would go on to state that their intention was to only allow cosmetic changes in their loot box system, and that no mechanical advantages would be present. Now, while that has remained true throughout the game's life cycle, what is more damaging is the effect we can see that it had on the industry at large. You remember around 2016 and 2017 when it seemed nearly every game started having loot boxes? Yeah, you can kind of thank Overwatch for that. Now, they were not the first game to implement this system. Hell, Blizzard wasn't even the first AAA studio to add them into their games. No, we really have EA with FIFA and Battlefield 4, Valve with Counter-Strike Global Offensive and Team Fortress 2, and Activision with Call of Duty Advanced Warfare to thank for this. However, after Overwatch's release and subsequent success with this monetization model, we saw a massive uptick over the course of the next year and a half, with loot boxes being integrated into several popular video games. This includes many games such as Call of Duty World War II, Forza Motorsport 7, and Gears of War 4, as well as some single-player experiences like Assassin's Creed Origins and Middle-earth: Shadow of War. This all culminated with the release of Star Wars Battlefront 2 in November of 2017, and this is where the loot box bubble seemed to have popped. It was during this time that many Asian, European, North American, and Oceanic countries began investigating into loot boxes in various different ways. Thankfully, this led to many companies removing loot box-like systems from their games, Overwatch not being one of them. This also led to the much more common Battle Pass model of monetization that we see as the much more prevalent system of today. Like it or not, this is ultimately Overwatch's legacy. When historians look back on the history of game design, Overwatch's biggest contribution will be on how this method of monetization was implemented and how it ultimately failed. Overwatch won the intention and heart of the gaming community, and even with its questionable monetization practices, was poised to be the next major player in the competitive FPS market. Blizzard made the lofty goal of providing all future content updates to the game for free in a drip-fed format to keep the player base engaged. This was met with incredibly positive reactions from the community, who were getting sick of the map pack and season pass culture that had infested games such as Call of Duty and Battlefield. The first year of major updates continued to propel Overwatch as a mainstay in gaming media. We saw the release of a competitive mode that allowed people to get a little bit more sweaty than your typical game of quick play. We also saw the opposite happen with the release of the arcade mode a little bit later in the year, providing some more chaotic but less serious gameplay that allowed those to unwind and play the game in a way that it wasn't typically designed for. In-game events kept players coming back periodically to experience the new updates. The Summer Games, Winter Wonderland, and my personal favorite, the Halloween Terror event, all brought some exclusive rewards, a visual change to many of the maps, and in Halloween Terror's case, a full-on PvE cooperative game mode that was honestly a blast to play. 2 new heroes were also added. First was Ana, a support character who used a sniper rifle to heal her allies. Second was Sombra, a character that provided a stealth and hacking style of gameplay that wasn't seen in the game before her. I remember her launch being a super big deal as she had a whole cryptic ARG being teased before making her big appearance at BlizzCon 2016. Old heroes also saw some significant reworks to balance them as the game went on. One hero in particular, Symmetra, was seeing incredibly low pick rates and playtimes compared to other heroes and was given a complete rework to make her kit more balanced and appealing to players. One of the largest changes to the standard play experience came at the tail end of 2016 when Blizzard added a 1 hero cap per team to quick play. There were definitely some pros and cons to this. On one hand, I really enjoyed the goofy fun that could be had by having a team full of Winstons or Bastions and the chaos that ensued. On the other hand, I do have to acknowledge how much more balanced that made the play experience. There were just some characters that having multiple of really made some team compositions overpowered. Having 2 Reinhardts, for example, switching back and forth between using shields to prevent the opposing team from making any progress led to some strictly less fun stalling metas. Thankfully, Blizzard learned from their mistakes and never allowed 2 shields again. 2017 is where we started to see some of the cracks begin to form in Overwatch. Let's start with some of the tougher stuff. We saw 3 new heroes this year, Orisa, Doomfist, and Moira. Each one presented a bit of a problem in terms of game balance that has to be noted as the question of power creep was starting to rear its head in many players' minds. First, Orisa was another primary shield tank. This caused the 2 shield meta begin becoming more commonplace, causing less exciting gameplay and a larger emphasis on ultimate stacking to make any progress. Next, Doomfist was very troublesome to play against. Doomfist had insane single target DPS potential and the ability to stun that ultimately made him a very unfun hero to play against. Finally, Moira is a character that lacked the real need of aim for her DPS while still providing insane numbers in damage and healing. Now, none of these characters were game-breaking necessarily, but all were met with a noticeable amount of criticism in their design during their launch. Outside of the character updates, the seasonal updates were a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, we had the amazing Uprising update that provided another co-op PvE event, but this time it was related to the actual story of the game. We also got a new event for the Lunar New Year, the Year of the Rooster. However, we still saw the return of the Summer Games, Halloween Terror, and Winter Wonderlands. Out of those 3, only Winter Wonderlands really saw any notable additions outside of new skins. Outside of the events, Blizzard still brought a steady stream of content to the game. We saw the addition of popular fan-requested modes such as Capture the Flag, as well as both standard and team deathmatch. We saw new maps to house those modes, as well as new standard maps for quick play and competitive, including Oasis, a futuristic utopia, Horizon Lunar Colony, a station on the moon, and Junkertown, the "hey, no, I swear this is actually Australia" counterpart to Gary, Indiana. In regards to the community at the time, Blizzard began to see a stronger uptick in player toxicity. See, in the beginning of Overwatch's life, no one really knew how to play the game, so it was kind of hard to get upset with one another when the stakes were so low. When 2017 rolled around, people had a lot of time to get good at the game, and many were highly into the competitive mode, meaning the stakes were a bit higher. Blizzard would put more of an emphasis on providing warnings to reported players in an attempt to maintain a positive environment for the game to keep players playing. Of course, having balance issues and adding in the previously mentioned problematic heroes definitely didn't do Blizzard too many favors. Thankfully, unlike the last time, Blizzard learned from their experience and the following year made sure to add the most balanced hero additions they could possibly design.
Wrong again, idiot!
Yeah, this was kind of the beginning of the end. The date was March 20th, 2018, and Overwatch players were met with the release of the new hero Brigitte. To say that this character was unbalanced would be an understatement. They effectively ruined the entire balance of the game. First, she was a support character that had an insane AoE healing potential. Second, Her standard attack created a short-range, high-damaging arc in front of her that could hit multiple targets that also procced her previously mentioned AoE heal. Finally, and debatably worst of all, she had a shield that was just as effective as the tanks that also had the ability to stun other players. Like, what? You know the term jack of all trades, master of none? Brigitte said fuck being a jack, took the cards, lit them on fire, and said we are playing her game now. This one character instantly became a must pick for any team that wanted a chance of winning. On the competitive side of things, she was the one who ushered in the GOATS meta. For those unfamiliar with what this meant that teams would forego having any damage characters in their composition in favor of having 3 tanks and 3 healers. This effectively made half of the roster useless and never see any competitive play. Brigitte received severe backlash from the community, and it took several months to see any significant nerf, and even after that, she was still considered a top-tier support character. Outside of her, we also saw the release of the heroes Wrecking Ball and Ashe later in the year. Wrecking Ball was another tank who focused on high mobility and swinging around, while Ashe was a damage character who primarily specialized in mid to long range encounters with her rifle. Several other maps were released, including Blizzard World, Rialto, and Busan. Another new story event was released, Retribution. It was very similar in scope to what we received at the previous year's Uprising, but this time it was focused more on Blackwatch, which was relatively well received by the community. The remaining events of the year were the exact same thing we saw the previous year, with little changed outside of new skins being added. Getting the same events 3 years in a row began to see people pass up on logging during these times, and the player base began to dwindle more and more. Outside of the game itself, the Overwatch League made its debut in early 2018 with a bustling community. XQC, Sinatra, and Carpe were just some of the notable names in the scene at the time, and many esports organizations had their own established teams, including Cloud9, Optic, and Misfits. Shortly after the first league and Brigitte's release, we started to see some other games that became increasingly popular within the multiplayer shooter community. 2017 saw the launch of PUBG, and 2018 saw the launch of Fortnite, both key players in the new battle royale genre. Seeing the new kids on the block, coupled with the many legitimate frustrations many players had with the lack of substantial updates, toxic community, and Overwatch's balance, especially with the GOATS meta, many players and content creators began leaving the game to spend their time elsewhere. Okay, so Blizzard has kind of been fucking their game up a lot at this point. But surely next year, they would finally find a way to balance the game to make the roster fully usable and not sacrifice on player enjoyment, right? Fucking roll queue? That was their solution? So instead of being able to get slotted into a lobby where you could pick any hero, now you must first select your role and wait in line for a slot to open. An idea that doesn't sound too bad on paper, but when put in practice, it essentially all but murdered the game. Now, if you wanted to play a damage hero, you had to wait, and these queue times could occasionally reach up to an hour. That's insane. If you wanted to be a tank, you could find a game almost instantly, the only problem being that many people didn't want to play that role. This essentially gave players 3 choices. Number 1, play something you don't want to. Number 2, wait an extended period of time to play the thing you actually want. Or 3, play a different fucking game. Guess which one people picked. Games such as Fortnite and PUBG kept growing in popularity, and now there was another huge game in Apex Legends that even had some of the hero shooter aspects built into their game. It was during this time that updates became even less and less substantial. Only 2 maps were introduced this year, being Paris and Havana. Only 2 heroes released: Baptiste, a support hero that has strong long-range DPS potential, and Sigma, another shield tank who added short-range AoE explosives to his gravity-based kit. The Storm Rising event was another solid PvE experience, but all of the other events of the year were the exact same. Again. Comparing year over year, we received 1 less hero, 1 less map, and it's the 3rd year in a row we received the same exact events. It was getting very tiring at this point. The next major blow to Overwatch took place at BlizzCon 2019, where a sequel was announced. This left many people scratching their heads. Why was a sequel necessary? Why couldn't Blizzard just fix what everyone already had? What was going to happen with Overwatch 1? Not many details were known about Overwatch 2, other than it would have a greater emphasis on story aspects, while the multiplayer for both the first game and the sequel received the same updates. But surely, this couldn't be the end of... fuck it, just take it to the next year. This year was the last of the major content updates to Overwatch. We received one new damage hero, Echo, a character with flight capabilities whose ultimate reminded us of a time when we could actually choose to play any character we wanted to, regardless of what our team composition was. Speaking of actually picking what we wanted to, Blizzard provided us with a priority pass that allowed those who did decide to queue up as tank when they didn't want to have their next game as a damage hero have a slightly shorter queue time. Oh wow, that was nice of him, if only people gave a shit. By this point, games such as Warzone and Valorant started emerging on the scene, and somehow during the midst of a worldwide pandemic where people have more time in the world to play video games than ever, they saw an ever-decreasing player base.
Mr. Krabs, what do we do?
Here, use this!
In September of 2022, it was officially announced that the Overwatch servers would be shutting down and being replaced by the ones of its sequel. Unfortunately, that means at the time of this video's upload, the game is officially dead. It's a bittersweet feeling seeing something that I have sunk hundreds of hours into vanish in the blink of an eye. I have so many fond memories of my time with this game that even when the game's direction took a turn for worse and I stopped playing it, I still look back on it as one of the best multiplayer shooter experiences I've ever had. There is still hope that the sequel may be something that can bring the original vision of the game back into the hearts of the community and reclaim the throne that the series previously occupied. The changes that we have seen already have been mostly positive, Battle Pass notwithstanding, and the community, while cautious, seems excited to see what is coming next. I know I made this joke like 3 times already, but I'm serious when I say I hope Blizzard has learned their lesson this time and really makes Overwatch 2 into something special.
The world needs us now, more than ever. Are you with me?